Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. April 25th, 2018.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services. Cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services.
Welcome back to the Kuhner Report, my friends. Okay, as you know, the tragic shooting death of Officer Gannon, a highly esteemed, very well-known, respected, and loved police officer, has shocked a lot of people, not just in the Cape Cod area, but frankly across Massachusetts and New England. And the question that everybody is asking, and that I'm asking, is an obvious one. Why was this killer, with a rap sheet as long as my two arms, allowed to be walking the streets and even allowed to be there to kill and murder Officer Gannon in the first place? Is there something seriously wrong with our criminal justice system, and do we need to profoundly reform and change it? And joining me now is my distinct honor and privilege. He is the chief of the Yarmouth Police, Chief Fredrickson. Chief, thank you so much for coming on the Kuhner Report.
Well, thank you very much. You're welcome.
Chief, I know this is a very difficult time for you and everybody at the Yarmouth Police Department. And before I even get into the changes that you may think or not think needs to take place, can you just share a few words about Officer Gannon, what he meant to you, what he meant to his colleagues, what he meant to the community?
Boy, I'll tell you, he was the example of what any parent wants as a son, first and foremost. Secondly, when he became a police officer, his commitment to the profession was, no one could be more committed than he was. He was respectful, smart, had the strong desire, loved being the canine officer, was a great community advocate for the police department, and because he truly cared about people. And there are things we're learning about Sean as we go through this that are making him more special than we're giving him credit for.
Chief Fredrickson, I've got to ask you the $64,000 question. I've covered this story extensively. I've looked at all the media reports. I won't even say his name. That's how much, frankly, I hold him in contempt. How is the killer allowed to be on the streets in the first place? The man had over 111 criminal charges against him. And so I've got to ask you, how is this man even allowed to be in that house when the raid took place in the first place?
Yeah, it's puzzling, but it's become the norm. So it's not that surprising that there's somebody out there like that, and there are many more out there right now in similar categories. So we became insulated or numb to it. But when you see the tragedy unfold as it has, and it happened in Auburn with these career criminals, it's like, come on. I mean, we know it's broken. We know there's major problems, and we know there's a side that tries to do that lends to it more towards reintegrating people than to keep them away from hurting people. And that's got to change. This is just going to change it. You know, and it's really, you don't even need a new law for it. It's just imposing what's already there and having the nerve to do it and make that the norm. And we will have a better community. We'll have a safer community for everybody across the state and beyond.
We are talking with the police chief of the Yarmouth Department, Chief Fredrickson. Chief, do you think the judges, or at least some of the judges in this state, are just way too lenient on criminals? Is that one of the problems?
I think that's the case. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like I just said, that's become the norm. That's how they're being trained. It's the culture that is there. It's similar, and you might get a judge that's maybe a little more strict than another, but generally speaking, they're following a pattern that is basically become acceptable, and we've allowed it to happen. And like I said, in the police profession, the general public doesn't see this every day, but we do. We've been yapping about it long enough, but it falls on deaf ears. And as chiefs across the state, we have to keep our officers motivated because they're the ones that get frustrated and see it happening over and over again. And we got to say, well, yeah, you did a good job. The judge let them out, but keep going out there and do a good job because the community needs you. And chase the same guys, like a catch and release program. So it's hard to keep it going.
Chief, you almost sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I can tell you that unfortunately it took this tragedy to put a drive towards changing this that is going to be respectful, but it's driven by anger. It'll be controlled, but yet I can tell you there's a lot of people, and I think it's the vast majority of people that want change. Not only with what happens with sentencing, et cetera, but how police have been treating and how the training is neglected, underfunded. There are certain laws we support through the Mass Police Chiefs and other organizations to help protect people, not help the police, help protect you, the public, and it gets ignored. And we're going to push that in a different way. We're hoping to have a bipartisan response to improving all of these things that need to be fixed, and they're really simple. In most cases, it's just up to our legislators to say yes. They don't have to go out there and stop cars. They don't have to go out there and face armed people. They don't have to go out there and in the middle of the winter and there's an inch of ice on the road and cover car accidents. They simply just have to say yes, and we'll do the rest. We're willing, ready, and able to do so.
Chief Frederickson, I know we're pressed for time, but you almost anticipated my next question. What specific criminal justice reforms, what specific laws would you like to see passed that you think could make the public safer, the community safer, and make the job easier for the men and women in blue?
Oh boy, there's a whole lot. I mean, the sentencing one we just talked about, that doesn't cost anybody anything. That just should be done right first and foremost. And we need to, kind of huddle with all the judges and say, hey, look, you got to change the culture of what you're doing. That's first and foremost. And I think that's already driven. You read something about the Cape and Islands delegation yesterday put out a letter that that's what they're going to do on top of the other things. And as far as the other pieces go, with other pieces that we support, there's a lot. I mean, we had a piece of legislation that has been stuck in committee for 25 years just to allow us to stop somebody for a motor vehicle violation in one town that rolls into another town, to allow that to happen and be legal. But it keeps getting blocked. It's been stuck in committee for over 25 years. That's simple. That improves public safety if they just allow that to happen. And it doesn't cost anybody a penny, but special interests get involved, and they just sit on it, and they think it's funny just sitting back there and not allowing these things to happen. And that's the type of stuff that just casts a change. This is not a game for us.
Chief Frederickson, let me ask you then this final question. With the death of Officer Sean Gannon, do you think now that public opinion in Massachusetts is changing, where we are going to start demanding maybe mandatory minimum sentences, tougher sentencing laws, in other words, to change the culture whereby we start supporting our police officers instead of constantly putting obstacles in front of them and helping the criminals as opposed to protecting the victims and the police?
Well, that would be interesting to see. I don't know that it even has to be that way, because there are penalties for crimes of violence, the most violent people, to be put away for a long period of time, and that's just what should be done. You don't have to change a law to do that. Ironically, just last week, the day after this, the governor signed a bill that actually got rid of a lot of minimum mandatories on some drunk sentences. So it's puzzling to see where that's going to go. But we need to have a quick overview of short and long-term goals and have a coalition of people across the state, bipartisan, to go forward and look at everything, because we need to protect our people.
We are talking, and we have been talking with the chief of the Yarmouth Police Department, Police Chief Frederickson. Chief Frederickson, please stay safe, and thank you so much for coming on the Kuhner Report.
Yeah, and thank you, and I thank everybody across this great state for their support. It's been unbelievable, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. And, we've got a big family that we need to heal, particularly the Gannon family and his wife and our police family. But your support has been immense.
Chief, we have your back. And, Chief, if you need anything, I mean that. You guys need anything, you give the Kuhner man a call, because we're behind you all the way.
Okay, join the coalition. You'll be there.
God bless you, sir. Take care.
Right,
Stay safe. Bye-bye. Okay, that was Police Chief Fredrickson from the Yarmouth Police Department. He says we need to change the criminal justice system. We need judges to be tougher. We need our laws to start being enforced. So let me ask you this. In the wake of the murder of Officer Sean Gannon, is it time to hold liberal judges in this state accountable? Is it time for us to start putting the rights of victims and police officers above the criminals? And let me throw one last log on the fire. Are politicians making the jobs of the police much harder to do? 617-266-6868. Your calls after this short break. 1:20 here on the great WRKO. Okay, my friends. So you just heard my interview with Yarmouth Police Chief Frank Fredrickson, and he's openly saying the politicians are making our jobs as police officers, our lives, much more difficult. And it's now starting to put our officers' very lives at risk. You've got the out-of-control liberal judges. You've got politicians, especially in this state, who are putting the rights of criminals above those of the victims and of the police who are sworn to protect law and order. And just to quickly remind everybody, Officer Sean Gannon, who was gunned down and murdered, his poor dog Nero, his canine dog, was also shot in the head and shot in the neck, was executing a warrant on Tom Latanowicz because he had violated his probation. And he failed. He didn't show up for a mandatory drug test. But the question is, why was Latanowicz even allowed to be on the street? Here is a guy who was charged with over 112 times, 112 criminal charges against him. Everything from, I kid you not, to trying to intimidate and bully a witness, arrested over 50 times on illegal gun possession, was also arrested for possession to distribute heroin, possession of heroin, stolen property, assault and battery. I mean, when I say a rap sheet as long as my two arms, literally, it was as long as my two arms. Why was this guy even allowed to be out on the streets? And so the question now we have to ask ourselves is are these judges who are so lenient on these criminals, are they partly responsible, and should they be held accountable for their own destructive, egregious behavior? If you're going to keep letting criminals out on the streets or give them very soft sentences, and these criminals end up killing people, or in this case, killing a wonderful police officer, aren't the judges in some way to blame? To me, the answer is yes. 617-266-6868. Rob in Milton, you're up next. Thanks for holding and welcome. Hello, Rob. Did we lose Rob? Okay. Maria in Boston, you're up next. Go ahead, Maria.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We missed you last week. I'm glad you had a good vacation.
I did, but I'm back and I'm recharged and ready to go.
That's excellent. I wish that we had better things to say. I mean, when it comes to our local police, they're not being backed up. You know, we've got organizations like Black Lives Matter that are just continuing to tear them down. We've got the Democrat Party. We've got Charlie Baker that just made life worse for the police department and everybody else. You know, then you move up to to our government. Donald Trump, they're tying his hands on everything, whereas if you looked at Obama, he was able to legislate with his pen and brag about it, and he wasn't blocked anywhere. I don't know how this all comes to an end, or if it can come to an end, given the fact that there's people like Stiers and Soros and all these people with unlimited amounts of money. I mean, how do you even go fight against someone with $100 billion and everything at the push of a telephone button? Do you know what I mean? It's overwhelming, and I don't know how much further we can go on with patting ourselves on the back that we elected Donald Trump, but unfortunately, and other people have said it, we're the ones that have to get up and go to work every day, but we listen to you. We listen to all of you. We listen to Fox, and we complain, and we talk about it, but we can't get out there and physically do anything because we can't leave our jobs.
No,
so
Maria,
I don't know what to do.
Maria, look, I really share your frustration, but look, I've got to urge everybody. Electing a president is not a silver bullet. And change comes from the bottom up. That's what the left, say what you want about the left, for all of their flaws, no matter how evil many of them are. This is something they have fundamentally understood for the last 40 to 50 years. So that, for them, their plan was to take over the institutions of society, what they call the long march through the institutions. We conservatives have to learn and take a page out of their playbook. So change can only come from the bottom up. You can't just elect a president and think, problems are going to be solved. And so we elected a law enforcement president. And now this law enforcement president is being besieged on all sides. But what we, the people of Massachusetts, I think have to say is enough is enough. Now, that recent crime bill that Charlie Baker signed, you want to talk about a Judas move. So instead of toughening penalties on criminals, they're weakening penalties on criminals. Instead of being tough on drug dealers and gangbangers, it makes it easier on drug dealers and gangbangers. So what do you think is going to happen? If you're softer on crime, you're going to get more crime. And by the way, there's a change in our culture taking place, and it's on many levels. You have Black Lives Matter that constantly demonize the police. You have now a judicial system, clearly, that is very soft on criminals. This guy, Latanowicz, notice, nobody ever tied his hands. You're talking about Donald Trump's hands being tied. Yeah, our hands being tied. Notice, Latanowicz, you want to own guns illegally? No problem. You want to assault and burglarize people? No problem. You want to deal heroin? No problem. 112 charges against the guy. He was barely 30 years old. I'm not talking about a 75-year-old career criminal. 30 years old. And this guy already had 112 criminal charges against him. And no judge said, this animal doesn't belong on the streets. Here, okay? One of the changes that I think we should fight for, you may disagree with me, but this is what I'm putting on the table. I think it's time to restore the death penalty. I know Massachusetts doesn't have it. I know they got rid of it decades ago, but I believe it is time to restore and return the death penalty to Massachusetts, and in particular to cop killers. I would expand it, not just cop killers, but let's just stick to the murder of cops. In fact, that is our Kuhner Country poll question of the day, okay? Sponsored by Kelly Financial Services. Should we have the death penalty for cop killers? If you believe the answer is yes, A. If you believe the answer is no, B. You can vote on my Twitter page or on my Twitter account, at the Kuhner Report, Kuhner, or you can vote on our website, wrko.com/Kuhner, Kuhner. And I'm a big yes. I'm a big A. And let me just give you a quick story, because it's not just happening in Massachusetts. Cops are dropping like flies. And I'm not just talking about Officer Gannon or Ron Tarantino or those cops that were just shot in Dallas. Listen now to this, just slightly north of us in Maine. Okay? Here, this is what's going on. This is what it's like to be a police officer today. There is now an intense manhunt underway in Maine following the murder of Somerset County Corporal Eugene Cole. He's a deputy sheriff. Eugene Cole was in a fully marked police cruiser. This occurred last night. John Williams, who's now on the loose and considered armed and extremely dangerous, walked up to apparently Corporal Eugene Cole in his car, shot him dead, and then stole his police cruiser. He then drove the car to a Cumberland Farms. This was in central Maine. Went in, engaged in an armed robbery, essentially, just robbed the place, and then ditched the car at about 5 in the morning. They found the police cruiser. The corporal is dead. Corporal Cole is dead. The people in Maine are now mourning. Again, like Sean Gannon, they go salt of the earth. Unlike Gannon, he was a bit older, a veteran of the Maine Police Department, somebody who they say was a salt of the earth guy, loved his family, loved his community, loved his job. He was essentially assassinated. Okay. So let's go to the killer now. He's still on the loose, by the way. They're saying if you see him or confront him, he's described, by the way, as being 5'6", 120 pounds. He's got brown hair. Call 911. Do not seek to engage him. They say he is a clear threat to public safety and public order. Do not engage him under any conditions. Call the police. Okay? But guess what? He had just been arrested, maybe a month ago, March 22nd, by the Massachusetts State Police. They found his car in a ditch. And so when they, on Route 495, and they found in his car, guess what? An unlicensed gun, including possession of ammunition without an FID card. In other words, he had illegal guns and illegal ammunition in his car. They go in front of a judge. The cops want at least a $10,000 bail, or at least the prosecutor. The judge says, nah, 10,000 is too much. Let's go 7,500. He then says, nah, let's not do 7,500 bail. Let's do $5,000 bail. Well, he can do a $5,000 bail. So he's out on the streets, and because we don't have tougher bail regulations, he then ends up killing a police officer in Maine. My friends, something is very seriously wrong. State Representative Shauna O'Connell will be on next. Should we restore the death penalty for cop killers? Okay, my friends, speaking of police, the Dallas police are now giving an update today after a shooting that claimed the life of another police officer down there. They're dropping like flies. Evan Heidenrich is in the WRKO newsroom. He has all of those details. Take it away, Evan. Should cop killers get the death penalty here in Massachusetts? Okay, my friends, decades ago, the death penalty was ruled in this state, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to be cruel and unusual punishment. So it is now banned in Massachusetts. However, Shauna O'Connell, state rep from Taunton, now says maybe it's time to return the death penalty. And joining me now is State Representative Shauna O'Connell. Shauna, thank you so much for coming back on the Kuhner Report.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for continuing to talk about this issue so important. And I heard what you just said, and I'll tell you what's cruel and unusual is that, fathers, dads are being killed and never returning home to their families, to their wives, to their sons and daughters. That's cruel.
Let me ask you point blank, why? Why should we have the death penalty for cop killers?
Law enforcement, they go above and beyond what any ordinary person does in their daily life. They walk out their door every single day. They have to put on, most of them, I think, bulletproof vests. They put their life on the line. They never know what they're going to encounter, even at something as simple as a traffic stop. Somebody could pull out a firearm, a knife, whatever, run them over with their car. Their lives are in great, great danger every single day, 24 hours a day. And they're always willing to, put themselves in danger to save someone else as well. So I think we need to, take that step to let them know when they, sacrifice and serve us and put their life on the line, that we're going to stand behind them, stand beside them, and protect them as well.
I just want to give a quote. I'm just going to quote you, and I thought it was very powerful. I believe is when you were on Fox and Friends, a couple days ago or recently. Here's what you said. Massachusetts has a reputation for being soft on crime, and unfortunately that hurts our public safety. We need to send a message to criminals that you kill law enforcement officers, you are going to get the death penalty. In your view, is Massachusetts too soft on crime? And does that encourage criminals to start gunning after the police?
Massachusetts is soft on crime, and you see it all the time. I mean, just in the case that we're talking about, number 125 here, 125, arrests or convictions or whatever on his rap sheet, and he's let go again and again and again. Criminals are let out on probation. They're given chance after chance. That criminal justice bill just passed that makes it even easier to be a criminal in Massachusetts and more lucrative to be a criminal in Massachusetts, and it takes away tools from law enforcement to enforce the law and fight crime. Massachusetts, I think, is pretty notorious for being soft on crime. And no one knows that more than law enforcement officers here.
Shauna, I agree with you 1,000%. But let me just play devil's advocate for a second, because this is what the other side argues. Sure. They say, look, even if this guy, Tom Latanowicz, would get the death penalty for gunning down Officer Sean Gannon, it's not going to bring Sean Gannon back. So what you're doing is you're giving a false sense of justice, according to the critics. They're saying it's not going to bring the officer back, and you're basically perpetuating a double evil. You have one killing, and now you're going to have a second killing, this time of Latanowicz, let's just say. So two wrongs don't make a right. What do you say to those arguments?
So let's talk about what happens then when these cold-blooded killers go to jail, and maybe they get life without parole. Maybe they get 50 years and they're able to get out at some point. Well, we know there's always a possibility that some governor or somebody will pardon them, or whatever the correct term might be, and they could get out of jail. They could be able to kill again. And then there's the Department of Corrections officers that have to deal with these animals in jail. And you kill a cop and you go to jail and you're a hero there. And people in jail with life without parole have absolutely nothing to lose. So that puts those Department of Corrections officers in a lot of danger each and every day again. And if they did kill or hurt another law enforcement officer, there's no other punishment. What do they care? There's nothing for them to lose. We can't do anything else to them. And you know what, Jeff? You hear people ask for life in prison. You don't hear people begging for the death penalty. People fear nothing more than death. So I really don't buy the argument that, it doesn't bring the life back. It's not meant to bring the life back. We know that that's not going to happen.
State Representative O'Connell, we had on the chief of the Yarmouth Police Department, Chief Frank Frederickson, on about half an hour ago. And he made the point that with our soft, lenient criminal justice system, that the police officers now are getting demoralized. He's seen it.
Yeah.
They're arresting people. They go in front of a judge. They let them out. They arrest him again. They go in front of a judge. They let him out. And privately, I can tell you this because I've spoken to many law enforcement officers. They're saying they're almost getting the feeling now, what's the point? I go out, I risk my life, I put the bad guy, I catch the bad guy, I put him away, I put him in front of a judge, and before you know it, 6 months later, 3 months later, a year later, I see him walking the streets. Are we now creating a situation where we're going to become increasingly lawless and putting the public at risk?
I think that situation has already been created. And, being soft on crime makes our streets less and less safe. Because, like you just said, what incentive do they have to spend all this time, all this energy, all this effort, put their lives on the line to bring these criminals in when they see this revolving door in the justice system and, criminals are walking in the court and then they're walking right back out of the court with a slap on the wrist or a suspended sentence or whatever lenient sentence they might get. It hurts us all when that happens. And, I know that, our heart goes out to Chief Fredrickson, the whole entire Yarmouth Police Department, the family. I know there are going to be a lot of people involved in this conversation. I know the legislators on the Cape, particularly Tim Whalen, are very passionate about this as well, and will definitely be a big part of this conversation in doing something about this. But we need to get more oversight and accountability for judges. They get these life appointments, and once they're in there, they start being lenient on criminals, and we don't really have the ability to know what their records are. Are they letting people off on firearms violations all the time? Because we hear that a lot. This guy 125 had some firearms violations as well. That's supposed to be an automatic jail sentence.
50.
So, yeah.
He had 50.
Oh, wow.
No, literally,
Wow.
50. I'm not kidding. He had 50.
Well, unbelievable. Yeah, see, and, who are the judges that let this guy go all those times? And yet here's the legislature trying to make criminals out of law-abiding gun owners. And when they don't even put the criminals, the real criminals with real firearm violations in jail.
We have been talking with State Representative Shauna O'Connell. Shauna, before I let you go, is there any movement up on Beacon Hill? Is anybody pushing legislation maybe to have the death penalty come back, let's say, for cop killers?
Well, I'm doing some research right now, working with some folks in Washington to see if we can get some language to fit into Massachusetts law right now. So it is a bit of a process because you really want to get something like that right. So we are definitely looking at that. I know there's going to be an oversight hearing as well that I believe one of the Senate committees is holding to bring in, the Chief Justice of the trial court, Bennett from Public Safety, and a bunch of other people to testify so that they can identify the loopholes and try to fix this problem. However, we're also talking about quite a few people in the legislature who are very lenient on crime as well. So we definitely need to keep our eye on what comes out of that hearing.
Do you think there will be changes? Do you think some of these loopholes will be plugged?
Well, I'm certainly going to try and get all the information I can to find out where we can plug the loopholes and how we can hold these judges accountable. I'm going to wait and see what comes out of this hearing. But, the criminal justice bill was just passed that eliminated almost all mandatory sentences. So it doesn't give you a lot of faith in what's going to come out, but I'm going to hold judgment until it does come out, and we'll, try to tighten up whatever they come up with to make sure that our communities are protected, law enforcement is protected, and we actually keep criminals behind bars, have oversight over judges. That's a really important part of this.
Shauna, I've got to ask you this. I know we're a little bit over on time here, but I've got to ask you this question. As a longtime resident of Massachusetts, you've been representing Taunton now for a while. What is wrong with this state? No, really, I'm being serious. Why are people in the criminal justice system? Why are so many in the media? Why are so many up on Beacon Hill? Why are they so lenient on violent, dangerous, deadly criminals? Is it the water? Yeah. What is it?
I've been asking myself that question since I've been in the legislature, and it's funny. Well, it's not funny, but someone said to me the other day, I think they put something in the air ducts up there in the legislature. I don't have an answer to that question, unfortunately. I mean, listen, if somebody's a low-level offender and there's somebody we can save from a life of crime, I would like to do that, but there are clearly people that we can't. And I think going easy on crime doesn't give people the message that they need to get out of that life of crime. You commit a crime and they go easy on you, well, then it's pretty easy to go and commit another crime.
Bingo.
And then another one and another one, because you don't face any consequences. It's just like punishing your kids. You know, the first time they do something bad, you need to punish them so they know that it's not acceptable and they can't do it again.
State Representative Shauna O'Connell, Taunton Republican, one of the few genuine reformers up on Beacon Hill. Shauna, as always, dynamite stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the Kuhner Report.
Thanks, Jeff.
Keep up the good fight. Thank you. Okay, my friends, let me ask you. It's the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Kelly Financial Services. Should there be the death penalty for cop killers in Massachusetts? You can vote on my Twitter page at the Kuhner Report, Kuhner, or go to WRKO.com/Kuhner, Kuhner. I'm a big yes. And to be honest with you, not just for cop killers. Murderers, rapists, the most serious crimes, I think it's time to bring back the death penalty. Justice needs to be served, and the criminals need to know that they're going to be held accountable. And the ultimate accountability is facing your maker. Agree, disagree, your calls next. 155 here on the great WRKO. Okay, my friends, tune in for the RKO box office cue to call tomorrow, Thursday at 8:30, 2:30, and 5:30 for your chance to win a pair of tickets to legendary folk rock singer and Grammy Award winner Art Garfunkel at the City Winery in Boston on May 11th and May 12th. Enjoy hearing some of your favorites from this rock and roll Hall of Famer in City Winery's intimate venue. For tickets, visit citywinery.com. You know, Jared makes a very, very interesting point. I talked about the last hour, how MS-13 here in the United States has now given an order to all of their foot soldiers in retaliation for Sessions' crackdown, saying we're going to do to the American cops what we do to them in El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. We're going to start killing them, executing them. And this way, they're going to lay off. That we're going to regain control of the streets. If you restore the death penalty for cop killers, it's going to act as a deterrent, especially to these MS-13 gangbangers who have now said it's going to be open season on the police. To me, it's a no-brainer. Bring back the death penalty. The sooner, the better. Agree? Disagree? Roland in New Hampshire, you're up next. Thanks for holding and welcome.
Hello?
Roland, you're on the air. Go ahead, my friend.
Yes, Jeff, a pleasure indeed. Listen, I'm going to have to...
Roland, we lost contact with you. Try to call us back, my friend. Washington in Mount Vernon.
Hi, Mr. Kuhner. How are you?
Good. Is your name really Washington? Are you really calling from Mount Vernon?
The reason I'm calling, Mr. Kuhner, is you talked about the Justice Department today, Justice Judicial System.
Yes.
When the forefathers founded the country, they appointed the Supreme Court to rule on the Constitution. Everything else has been done by politicians. So politicians appoint the judges are politicians. In order to get rule of law back to this country, what it must do is have every single criminal complaint be ruled on by a jury of the people. That way you take it out of the hands of the judges, because they're not doing their jobs. They're politicians, and this has evolved over 200 years. They're appointed by the governor. They're appointed by, recommended by other people. As long as you have this system in place, you will not have rule of law in this country. We become an oligarchy.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and you're completely right. What you now have are hacks. They're not really judges. They're hacks. They're political hacks. And they behave like political hacks. And you get the effects of political hacks. And that's why, to me, this is going to be one of the big issues of our time. We have to start reining in the out-of-control judiciary. John in Hanover, you're up next. Go ahead, John.
Hey, always a pleasure, Jeff.
Hey, John.
So many interesting things, and boy, Shauna is fantastic, isn't she?
She's great. She's absolutely great.
I know that you got a lot of callers. Couple things. I wish Shauna would run for governor. I wish Shauna would also craft a bill, and she probably will. I'm going to talk to her about it. She knows me. We need to not have judges have lifetime appointments. That's the first thing.
Bingo.
Yes, that 100%. That's common sense. It's a no-brainer. We have to take politics out of it. They need to be held accountable. And of course, Jeff, I'm for, add me to the list, I'm for the death penalty especially for cop killers, but a working death penalty. If it's not a working death penalty, if guys are sitting on death row,
I agree with you. I agree. John, I'm up against it. I got to let you go, but it's got to be swift, it's got to be quick, and it's got to be decisive. I'm with you all the way. A lot more. Don't touch that dial. I promise.
The voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 100.7 WZLX HD2 Boston, an iHeart radio station.